So here's a map of New York. Can you tell what those different colors are? What does that represent? Well, those represent the different counties in New York. So here we are in Rochester, Monroe County. You can see all the other counties throughout New York. How about this map? We see major roadways and waterways and lakes. We can take a map of New York and divide it up. You see the counties, but what about these 10 sections? Those are environmental development sections. What about this one? Here we see different library systems. There's the Monroe County Library System that encompasses our county. Here's the Pioneer Library System that goes from Wyoming up to Wayne. This one you know. These are the watersheds around New York State. We drew those when we talked about surface processes. How about this one? So we got reds and blues, and these represent the percentage of votes that Obama and McCain got back in 2008 presidential election. So we could map lots of different information onto New York. Here's a New York map that shows elevation. We can see where the flat plains are along the Great Lakes. We could see where there's some plateaus and a lot of valleys and riverways. And we could see the Adirondack Mountains up here as well. This is similar to what you see on page 2 of the reference tables with the different landscape regions. We can look at this map in New York. This map is, imagine taking all of the soil and scraping it off of New York, all of the cities and houses and trees, just scraping off, all the people and the squirrels just scraping off of New York. And the rock that you would see underneath is going to have different ages. Some rock is older and some rock is younger. So each of these colors represents different ages of rocks. This is what we see on page 3 of the reference tables. You're going to need page 3 of the reference tables as well as some colored pencils as well. So go ahead and pause the video, take a moment and get those things out. So here on page 3, we see this map of New York State, and we have these different symbols. Those different symbols represent different geologic periods and eras within the Earth's history and when those rocks were formed. What we're going to do is we're going to color some of this and then equate it to page 8 and 9 of our reference table. So we're going to be going back and forth between page 3, which is this one here, and page 8 and 9. Feel free to pause the video as you need. Let's start with this section here. You'll notice there's a large section that's these little dots, and that we can see down here is where we find Devonian aged rock. So Devonian aged rock is shown by the little dots. This is mostly limestone, shales, sandstones, and conglomerates in this area. Let's take a moment and shade in the Devonian rocks. Be sure you shade this in so you can still see what's going on underneath. Don't shade it in so much that you can't see towns like Elmira or Ithaca, or that you can see that this is the Susquehanna River right there. This equates to, this is the same as on page 8, this Devonian rock. So let's also, and again, shade it with the same color. It doesn't have to be red that I'm using, whatever color you want. Shade it the same color as you just shaded on page 3. I'm going to shade it again lightly so you could still see the words underneath. We still need to be able to read everything. So go ahead and read that. And then remember, this continues from page 8 over to page 9 as well. So now we can answer questions such as, if we look at the index fossil, remember these circles represent index fossils. C is a type of trilobite. There's the trilobite line. C is the index fossil Phacops. So you might say, where in New York State can I find the index fossil fake ops? Well, we know C is during the Devonian time, and on page 3, that would be in here. So if you wanted to find that fossil, you know you'd head down to this area, the Catskills or the Southern Tier, to go find the Finger Lakes region to find that fossil. All right, let's look at another one. We also have, besides Devonian rock, we also have some Silurian rock. Again, very similar limestone, shale, sandstones, and conglomerates here in the Silurian rock. And that's parallel lines that are straight up and down. Let's shade in our Silurian. Again, use whatever color you want. Don't do it too dark that you can't see what that is underneath. The Silurian rock was a little bit older than the Devonian rock. Let's shade that on pages 8 and 9. One of the major geologic events, remember this column here? Important geologic events in New York, were all the salt and gypsum deposits. Well, where do we find a lot of the salt deposits? In Silurian aged rock. We find that in the rock that is this old, this age here. That salt that we put on our roads all comes from that area as well. So one of the things that people tend to make a mistake on is they think that Rochester is in Silurian aged rock. Notice that the word Rochester is there, but the dot that represents Rochester is not in Silurian. It's in this next layer up here, which has parallel lines that are tilted. So parallel lines that are tilted are Ordovician rocks. I'll use a purple to show my Ordovician rocks. Notice Rochester is not in Silurian rocks. Rochester is here in the Ordovician rocks. So here we can see where the Ordovician rocks are in New York State. Now, we're not going to do every little one, but I think there are some other ones that I'd like to do. Don't forget to also put these Ordovician rocks on page 8 and 9 as well. So here are the Ordovician rocks. So I want you to see how there's a connection between the rocks found, or the data found on page 3 to what we see on pages 8 and 9. So again, if you say, hey, I want to find the index fossil T, this coral down here, where would I go to find that fossil? Well, since T is there in Ordovician rocks, I would head to the rocks around us in Rochester, Watertown, down around Albany as well, maybe up in the North Country there as well. Let's head on a little bit further down and take a look at some middle Proterozoic rocks. So the rocks from the middle Proterozoic have two different symbols on there. There's this wavy symbol as well as that little tick mark symbol there. And those are all the rocks, mostly of the Adirondack Mountains. And you could see that we're switching. Instead of talking about dominantly sedimentary rocks, now we're talking about intensely metamorphosed rocks. We're talking about dominantly metamorphic rocks. So let's go ahead to this area up in the Adirondacks and shade that in. That's including both this symbol by Old Forge as well as Mount Marcy and that symbol there. Let's see where this now connects to pages 8. Middle Proterozoic. This is Precambrian rock. So now we're coming over here to our Precambrian era. Precambrian eon, sorry. And here's the Archean and the Proterozoic. We're talking about the middle Proterozoic. These rocks right here from the middle Proterozoic. Remember how this heads on down to the expanded area. And we're talking about these rocks here. So much older than Devonian, Silurian rocks. And if you remember, this column right here is the New York rock record, whether we have some sediment or bedrock. So we have bedrock right here from the middle Proterozoic. And that connects to, if we head all the way over to page 9 as well, to the Greenville orogeny. And notice what it says for the Greenville orogeny, that this is metamorphism of bedrock now exposed in the Adirondack and Hudson Highlands. Well, where are the Adirondacks? The Adirondacks are right where we just shaded the middle Proterozoic rock. There are others, right? There's other rock records in New York, but the last one I think I'd like to shade for you guys is the rock, or maybe I should say the not rock, the almost rock, that makes up Long Island. So let's give this as our last shade here. And it has that dashed pattern, which equates over here to Cretaceous and Pleistocene. Now those, the Cretaceous and the Pleistocene, are not geologic periods or eras. Where can we find Cretaceous and Pleistocene? We're going to come over here to these epochs. There's the Pleistocene right there. So that's an epoch, and notice how far up it is, how recent that is, right? This is very recent. And notice that it's not rock, it's not bedrock, but it's just sediment. And sure enough, when we read what it says here, it tells us that this material, where Long Island is weakly consolidated to unconsolidated gravels, sands, and clays. It's not a rock yet. Consolidated means put together like a rock to make solid. Well, it's unsolid. Well, it's just gravel, sands, and clays. And we talked about how Long Island formed when the glaciers pushed forward and just left a moraine, or just left a bunch of material, just sands and gravels behind. And that's just sitting there right now. So it is yet to turn into a rock. It's just a pile of great glacial garbage sitting in there. Not yet rock, but we do here in our map, we see that it's Cretaceous and Pleistocene age, or very recent. So let's now take our color from Long Island, whatever color you had there, and let's put it here in this Pleistocene rock. And sure enough, we see a major event in New York, advance and retreat of last continental ice, which corresponds to what we said is the formation of Long Island. So we have a big connection between pages in our reference tables. There's page 3, and that goes right along with pages 8 and 9.